requirement under state statute, under your zoning ordinances, in subdivision regulations at the master plan. It's a public informational meeting. Then it's referred to the town council, again, a public hearing advertised, and then it's referred back to the planning board for preliminary plan at a public hearing. And at that point, that public hearing is even more specific because the applicant has the obligation to provide notice to abut 200 feet of the property boundaries.
Thank you.
No, I'm glad, no, thank you. Mr. President, if I may continue. Mr. Mancini, in this, following the area map there, Exhibit B, it's very clear it's a sample document, I want to make that clear. So I'm going to read the first sentence. The multiple solar projects, the projects are anticipated to be built within the proposed overlay district and expected to operate for a period of 25 to 40 years, depending on exercise and extension provisions. At the end of the project, the site will be decommissioned, meaning restored to its natural state as follows. Decommissioned, and then there's 4 points there. Last sentence, the decommissioning will be secured by a decommissioning bond in the form shown in Exhibit C. So if you flip the page, very clear that it's a sample decommissioning bond. But I want to chastise you for using this because it's totally erroneous to this town. One is the second paragraph. Unless there's a landfill over there with a cap on it,
No.
why did you choose this?
Yeah.
You know, it makes me question the whole project even more.
The
I know it's a
reason-
sample.
No, I absolutely understand. And the reason we did that is because this is actually one of the most restrictive ones. So it's a sample of the if you will, the greatest umbrella that covers the most. And it's also an example of the opportunity for both the planning board and the town council to identify specific particulars. Now, let me give you an example. If we filed, when we file our plan for master plan, one of the requirements that we have under section 5.75 is to give the planning board a plan with regards to environmental habitat. And let's say, for argument purposes, we find that the property is infested with dragonflies and they're extinct. Well, one of the things that we want to ensure, the planning board is going to require us to ensure, is that there's some type of plan put in place to preserve that, either to provide some type of conservation, either on-site or off-site. And then you want to present and protect that by way of a bond, so in the event that it's not done, you can pull the bond and do it. And the sample that you have before you is a sample of a property that has an existing landfill site. The applicant is obligated to clean that site per DEM regulations and what other town regulations are there. That bond ensures that not only is the decommissioning of the solar panels taking place, but any of the conditions of the planning board are also met. So it's a way to tie in conditions and the solar panels. But that's being transparent and being very extensive and showing you the magnitude of power that the planning board and the town council still have together. We're not stripping any powers from any agencies or stripping any authority from anybody. We're being transparent and showing you there's a lot of technicalities that still have to be unwind and gone through that process, and that's what the planning board does. And by the way, when I said originally that the zoning board's requirements were redundant, when you look at 5.76, what the zoning board is doing is the same work that the planning board is doing. And that still can take place. That's still going to take place. We're still obligated under 5.75 and 5.76, except that 5.76 requirements are now being addressed by the planning board and not the zoning board. One of the underlying pins of a special use permit is to find, one, that it's consistent with the comprehensive plan, and two, that the uses are compatible with the existing surrounding area. For example, drive-throughs are most often in many communities done by special use permits, and the fundamental purpose is to ensure that the drive-through is compatible with surrounding existing uses. You don't want to have a drive-through next door to a school because of the traffic concerns that would be associated with that. It's the same thing here, but that's already being handled by the planning board.
Yeah, I recognize it's a sample decommissioning.
I would like to give very simple.
Just identify yourself.
Marty Pasquale, Green Development. The reason you have that in front of you was a template that says draft on it.
Yes.
So I heard from the council and the planning board that they wanted a decommissioning bond. We went to the insurance company that gives us bonds, saying, can you please give us a draft of what the decommissioning bond would look like? So it's just given for informational so you can see it, but there's 3 other opportunities, either cash, surety, liens, and that was asked, and that's a bond that gets renewed every single year. So it was only given for a template to show you to see what the bond would actually get for. But it could be several other ways after tonight's meeting.
Little
And then
notification that this is just a template, would have
so it was a sample to try to give information to the council.
So to follow up on that same page, at the bottom of the page, bullet point number 1, the trustee has received the default notice pursuant to paragraph 6 of the standby trust.
Yeah.
Okay, there's no paragraph 6. So if you're going to submit stuff, and I know it's a sample, I want to make that clear. I'll tell you, I'll be looking at this very closely, as I'm sure the rest of my council members will.
Correct, and so let's clarify what a standby trust is, and there's no explanation of it there, but ordinarily, what you would want to do as a town council is you don't want to be the body that actually governs and polices the actual bond. You're going to get a trustee that's going to be put in place as a third-party independent observer and guidance, and both parties are going to be able to refer to that third-party independent. It's like an escrow agent. And the purpose of the standby trust and the trustee is to ensure that the conditions of the approval are met, and to ensure that the conditions of the bond are met. And if there's an issue, the town would notify the trustee. The trustee would then notify us by way of the default notice. And that's how the process goes.
And you are familiar that we will require a bonding company, very high standard,
Correct.
Moody's or Standard & Poor's, right?
Similar to what you've done, and no different than what you've done in the past in regards to road bonds
Just
and
want to make
construction
sure so we
bonds.
don't have to have this
Sure.
discussion in the future. Thank
Good,
you.
good point.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ms. Benoit?
I do have just a couple of questions. My first question, and maybe you have answered it directly, but why not go for the special use permit?
Well, two primary reasons. One is there's no question that one of the reasons why we don't want to go through the special use permit is the time and the expense. The second is the process is inefficient because of the fact that the planning board has already extensively reviewed it. And this brings to a very good point, which you've heard a lot tonight, and that is, why are you doing something different than Exeter's doing? Well, when you look at your statutory structure, your town ordinances, your zoning ordinances, your comprehensive plan, and your charter, it's drastically different from the town of Exeter. The town of Exeter has a very, very narrow and very limited ordinance that governs solar arrays. They don't have the type of items that you've addressed, and you've specifically, you, the town council, and the town, has specifically just a year ago extensively addressed how solar arrays should go through the process. And you've added a special use permit, but you're making the applicant essentially show everything to the planning board, get a planning board approval, show the same information to the zoning board, and get a zoning board approval for a use that you've made conditionally permitted. Under the law, you have permitted, you have non-permitted, and you have a special use permit. And all a special use permit says is that the use is permitted conditionally. And what's that mean? What that means conditionally is that you have to get the zoning board approval for the use to be able to go forward. But what you've also done is you've made the master plan process much weaker, because the master plan at the initial stage is only a conditional approval. And with a conditional approval, so if the developer gets a conditional approval, he's not solidified. He can't get financing. If he can't get financing, and he doesn't know whether or not he's going to be able to get the financing and get the approval, then what you've done is, well, you've created a process of putting the developer in limbo. And it makes it very difficult for a developer to expend the type of monies that are going to be needed to expend here without any certainty as to what they actually have as far as approval. That's the concern with the special use permit. So it's not that we're circumventing the process. We just think that this is a process that is more efficient and better aligned with your zoning ordinances as already drafted, and also with the practicality of how a project can get financed. Because you can get a project approved, but if you can't get it financed and built, it's a useless project.
All right, and how was the overlay area determined?
That's not a legal question, that's a practical question. How's the overlay district?
The overlay district defined?
No,
How was it determined?
Oh, determined.
Could you identify yourself, please?
Yeah, Michelle Carpenter with Green Development. So we looked at, maps of the town, and we tried to identify areas that seemed suitable for renewable energy, and then in the process, we tried not to make that an overlay district that was incredibly encompassing. So we put some criteria in there around minimum system sizes. The town ordinance in place for solar already has a very good way to handle and process smaller renewable energy projects. So it was obvious that there needed to be a minimum size because there is already a process to do those smaller projects. And then in addition to that, we looked at, proximity to substations and other criteria that can go into siting renewable energy, and kind of came up with those encompassing factors, but we understand that's at the town's discretion in terms of what gets approved.
Because looking at the map, you have the Martin Farm included in that and Wright's Dairy Farm, correct?
Yes.
Okay. My concern is that I don't want to take away land that can be developed into a business that then supplies jobs and brings in tax revenue. So I don't want to lose those business districts that may fall into this overlay where the acreage is there.
That's a very good point, and that goes to what I described earlier, is to saying that the overlay district is superimposed. So it's not changing the zoning district, it's not changing your district map, it's not changing the land future map. So the underlying zone remains the same. There's no change to whether or not that property is subject to residential or commercial zoning.
No, I understand
So-
that. I just don't want to lose a business location that we could put a business in place and we lose it to a solar farm.
Correct, but we're not saying that if you're in the solar, I mean, you still have to go through all those requirements, so it's not an automatic right by any means.
And I have a quick question for Mr. Farah. How much land is already cleared for your driving range?
Oh, probably 15 acres.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. McGee, do you have any questions?
Not yet.
I won't be offended by that.
Oh, I misunderstood the
I think you said enough.
I think so too.
I could make up a question. You want to say it?
No, I think I have this whole step process correct. And since the public meetings will be there, so these people can come back if they have additional problems, I think again. And hopefully we'll have more from all areas at this point. And
also,
I just don't want, I feel to the point where people with land, it's touchy on both ends. I always say, the woman just said, I called her the O'Donnell girl. I don't even know her married name. And I look here, and I look around this place, and there's people that, no, I didn't have you as a student, but many I did, and it's important. It's there for many of us left, and then we came back, because it's like, it was about, there's no place like home. And we have people that know we need change, and other people that desperately are clinging to what was. And it was so wonderful growing up. I knew it all. So I think people have to be represented, but we have to remember, they own the land, and to me, it's a constitutional right. But thank you.
Mrs. Zelinski?
Dr. Roberts? As council members, we nominate people and appoint them to boards. Cindy, if I may call you Cindy, because I've always called you Cindy. Cindy, I nominated you, and you were appointed to the planning board. Never, ever have I doubted the wisdom of the planning board's decisions. So I just want to reinforce that, and I'm sure the colleagues up here, I trust the planning board decision. So I just wanted to make that clear. Thank you.
My turn, I guess. I'll be honest, the idea of cutting down 200 acres of trees to put up a solar farm, it doesn't sit right with me. However, that's a false premise, right? Because it's 200 acres, we're assuming, by saying that, everybody that's up here that has a question, has a problem with cutting down the trees, that's not the issue. We're not looking at trees, they're his trees. He can cut, he's already began cutting down those trees. How many, think about 10 acres have already been clear cut from what I understand. So he can already cut down those trees, all right? So the premise that if we don't have a solar farm, we're gonna save the trees, that's false. What we're looking at is, you don't have a solar farm, you have houses. Now, personally, I'm not so against houses like so many other people, but given the choice, houses, solar farm, I'll take the solar farm for obvious reasons. Just the traffic alone, the schools, there's just, I mean, you name it, there's a million reasons why I would rather have a solar farm that's just gonna sit there quietly generating money for the town over houses. So, why not go to zoning? I understand that argument. The reason I don't want to go to zoning, and I'll be very blunt with you, I don't want to go to zoning because this is a multi-million-dollar decision. It's a multi-million-dollar project, and this is going to affect the town for a long time. Decisions like that should be left in the hands of the people that were elected to make big decisions. Okay? We're talking millions of dollars over the course of the life of this solar array. I think to have appointed people, very qualified people, don't get me wrong, but they weren't appointed to make multi-million-dollar decisions. Those decisions should be made by the council. Okay? So I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to come right out and say I support this. But I'm going to answer a couple of quick questions. And one of them was from, if you remember last week, Mr. D'Annunzio got up here and he spoke very eloquently, and he was in support of the solar farm with certain conditions. I spoke to Mr. D'Annunzio. I discussed his conditions. We went over everything that all his concerns. Because of that conversation I had with him, I made 3 amendments to the, I was, along with the solicitor and the planner, we made 3 amendments to the proposal. So, what were his concerns? His concerns were that if people wanted to do something within the overlay district, that basically they would have carte blanche and they'd be able to do whatever they want. Okay, so we adjusted the ordinance to address that situation. Now, if anybody within the zoning wants to do anything, and anybody within the overlay district wants to do a solar farm or anything, they have to go through the same process. They got to go to planning, they got to come to the council for approval. They're not going to get carte blanche. And we took it even one step further. If Green Development wants to do anything beyond their project, beyond the agreed upon project, after it goes to planning, they don't have carte blanche to just expand their solar farm. They have to go back before planning and then come back before the council for approval. So not even Green Development, who proposed this overlay district, has carte blanche to make their solar array as big as they want to. They have to come before the council and the zone and the planning board in order to do that. So now, Mr. D'Annunzio also stated that his concerns were the current project could be expanded without input from the town. That's not the case, as I just said. Obligation for a decommissioning project after 25 years. We addressed that. That's in the ordinance. After speaking with Mr. D'Annunzio, I addressed all his concerns that he brought up here the other day. He then sent a letter to me, and I asked him for permission to read this publicly, and I will make it part of the record. Mr. D'Annunzio sent a letter to me, and he said, this is how it reads, to John Beauregard, President, and members of the North Smithfield Town Council, I write in support of the solar project on consideration for the Waterbury Hill area, provided that the final proposal include proper safeguards for present and future interests of the town and the neighborhood. Those are the safeguards that he discussed and he asked me to add to the ordinance. Now, this is where I agree with him 100%. Obviously, it would be in the best, it would be best if the area to remain pristine woodland. But this is the least likely outcome for the future, especially now that the discussions of a new master plan include a proposal to rezone the area for commercial development. Broad commercial and even residential development would create many more destructive problems. Because the alternatives would be so much worse in so many ways, I believe the solar project would be the most prudent and least disruptive use of the land. Mr. D'Annunzio. That's a man that was currently on the zoning board and he supports the project, and he supports what we're doing. What his concern was, not so much that the project wasn't gonna go before zoning, but any future projects or an expansion of this project would not have to go before anybody.